Welcome. Welcome to the online class of Professor K.Paul, University Department of English, BRA, Bihar University, Muzaffarpur. Dear students of PG Semester 2, CC5, Unit 1, you are welcome to my class. Welcome and good morning. Today, I am going to deliver my lecture on theme and presentation of the film Ghare Bayre and the novel The Home and the World. Ghare Bayre, the film Ghare Bayre was directed by eminent filmmaker Satyajit Ray, and the novel Ghare Bayre, or its translation into English, The Home and the World, is written by Rabindranath Tagore. So let us begin. Ghare Bayre, The Home and the World, is a 1984 Indian Bengali romantic drama film by director Satyajit Ray. Based upon the novel Ghare Bayre by Rabindranath Tagore, it features Soumitra Chatterjee, Victor Banerjee, Jennifer Kendall in her last film appearance, and Swati Lekha Chatterjee, now Sengupta. Satyajit Ray, prepared a script for it in the 1940s, long before he made his film Pather Panchali. Pather Panchali is one of the best Indian cinemas, and in the world also. One of the best films in the world. Pather Panchali. And so this way you see that Pather Panchali, the film deals with a subject that has often appeared in Ray's work, the emancipation of women and what it does to them and to the men who love them. It deals with a subject that has often appeared in Ray's work, the emancipation of women and what it does to them and to the men who love them. The film was a competition for the Palme d'Or at the 1984 Cannes Film Festival. At the 32nd National Film Awards, it won the National Film Award for Best Feature Film in Bengali. The story is set in 1907 on the estate of the rich Bengali noble Nikhilesh. The role is played by Victor Banerjee in the chaotic aftermath of Lord Curzon's partition of Bengal into Muslim and Hindu states. The nationalist movement is trying to impose a boycott of foreign goods by claiming that imports are at the root of Indian poverty. He lives happily with his beautiful wife Bimla, Swati Lekha Sengupta, until the appearance of his friend, revolutionist Sandeep Soumitra Chatterjee. Sandeep, a passionate and active man, is a contradiction to the peace-loving and somewhat passive Nikhilesh. He easily attracts the innocent and suspecting Bimla, creating a love triangle. Although Nikhilesh figures out what is happening, he is a mature person and grants Bimla the freedom to grow and choose what she wants in life. As their marriage was arranged when he was a girl, Bimla experiences the emotions of love for the first time in a manner that helps her understand that it is indeed her husband Nikhilesh who really loves her. Importantly, Nikhilesh tells Bimla that he would like her to have a life not only inside the home but outside of it as well. A controversial stance in 1916 when the novel was written. Satyajit Ray wrote a script for Ghare Bayre in the 1940s, but the film, which was to have been directed by Harishadhan Das Gupta, was never made. Years later, Ray returned to his script and reworked it, describing the original version as amateurish. Soumitra Chatterjee was a Ray regular, having started his career with Opur Shankar. Victor Banerjee had also worked with Ray in Shatranj Ke Khiladi. Swati Lekha Chatterjee, however, was a stage actress with the theatre group Nandikar. With no experience of acting in films, Ray saw her in a stage production and decided that she was the right choice to play the role of Bimla. In 1983, during the shooting of the film, Ray suffered two massive heart attacks. His son Sandeep Ray completed the project from his detailed instructions. The film did well commercially. When initially released, Ray's heart attack may have played a role in this. For the Indian audience, there was an additional interest since it featured the first full-fledged kiss in Ray's films. Critical response in India was mixed. It was mixed. Sumit Mitra, in his long review in India Today, said the film looks like an intended failure. Some critics, including Mitra, thought Swati Lekha Chatterjee was miscast as Bibla, as she herself recounts in a recent interview more than 30 years after the release of the film. She says, one critic wrote a line, she never lived nor looked the role. She goes on to add that after reading the reviews, she had felt like killing herself. Abroad, however, the response was mostly positive. The film premiered at Cannes, where it was well received, although Ray was too ill to travel. At his insistence, both Soumitra Chatterjee and Swati Lekha Chatterjee went to Cannes. The latter recalls being felicitated for her performance. Those around came and hugged me, Pauline Kael wrote. Toward the end, Bimla, who was encouraged into independence by her husband, becomes desperate to express that independence recklessly, heedlessly. When it comes to truthfulness about women's lives, this great Indian movie maker Satyajit Ray wrote in the New York Times, as with the works of any great director, the home and the world defies easy categorization. In close up, it's a love story, but it's one so fully defined. So fully defined. As with the works of any great director, the home and the world defies easy categorization, including the political differences between Gandhi, who led the nationalist movement, and Tagore, who, like Nikhil, stood for civilized compromise. About the performances he wrote, the film is acted with immense grace by its three leading actors. Roger Ebert noted that the real story of the film takes place within Bimla's heart and mind. He added, it is a contemplative movie, quiet, slow, and a series of conversations punctuated by sudden bursts of activity. From Devi to Charulata, Satyajit Ray's portrayal of Indian women is known to be real, articulate, and masterful. But in the later stage of his career, he created Ghare Bayre, The Home and the World in 1984 that spoke volumes about the relations between the nationalist movement and Indian women, based on the novel by Rabindranath Tagore 1919 with the same title. The film effectively recreates the era of the Swadeshi movement and the dichotomy experienced by women as part of the reforms. When it comes to truthfulness about women's lives, this great Indian movie maker Satyajit Ray shames the American and European directors of both sexes, Pauline Kael and celebrated film critic from the New Yorker. Before understanding the characters in the film from a gendered perspective, it is important to understand its context. Set in the early 20th century, marking the emergence of nationalism and the spread of the Swadeshi movement amongst masses, especially in Bengal. This movement gave Indians the chant of Vande Mataram and impacted the country's political discourse. Set at this backdrop, Ghare Bayre tells a story of Bimla, who is married to Nikhil, a wealthy but liberal landowner. Bimla is an ideal housewife who has never set a foot outside a certain section of her home after marriage. Her husband Nikhil understands the nuances of the Swadeshi movement but does not completely support it. He is constantly provoked by Sandeep, Soumitra Chatterjee, his friend and the fierce leader of the Swadeshi movement. In the beginning of the film, Bimla listens to the speech delivered by Sandeep and immediately identifies with the principles of the Swadeshi movement. Nikhil, being a progressive husband, asks Bimla to cross the passage between the Antar Mahal inner courtyard to enter the living room and have a conversation with Sandeep about the movement. Bimla is initially hesitant, but gradually she gains confidence and crosses the path. As the film progresses, we see her sharing a platonic relationship with the charismatic Sandeep. Ghare Bayre happens to be one of the most ambitious adaptations of a Tagore novel by Ray. He wanted to adapt this novel into a film in 1947 to 48, as I have told you earlier, but could not due to some unknown circumstances, but the plot lingered on in his mind. This is one of the most complex works of Tagore, as it has a lot of elements. It highlights the hypocrisy of the nationalistic movement and comments about the dichotomy forced upon the Indian upper class women. It also largely expresses the disappointment that Tagore experienced as being a part of the movement. Incorporating all these elements into a film is not easy. That is why many Indian critics felt that this film was over ambitious. Western critics failed to associate with the film, calling it a very regional and irrelevant for the world audience. But Ray, in his screenplay, has masterfully woven the question of dichotomy and the hypocrisy of nationalism through the main characters. He has made sure that Bimla remains to be the central character of the narrative. Ray was so passionate about this film that he completed it even after suffering 2 heart attacks during the filming Ghare Bayre. Ghare Bayre was nominated for the Palme d'Or at the 1984 Cannes Film Festival. Ray has focused more on the conversations between the characters than narrating it through the cinematic language. By using symbolism, he carefully builds the image of a Bhadra Mahila, a respectable woman in Bimla. In the film, we see Bimla trying out new blouses stitched in the Western style. She is taking classes of Western music and mannerisms from an English woman. On the other hand, she is cooking and serving her husband. She is also expected to follow the traditional values attached to being a married Hindu woman. Like in one scene, Nikhil asks Bimla to sing a Bangla song and she obediently complies. All that Bimla lives for is to fulfill her husband's desire. This concept emerged with the nationalist movement, which claimed to have solved the women's question. Here, in this movement, lies the origin of a dichotomy between the home and the world, or spiritual and the material. The world was the outer public life, while the home was one's own spiritual self. The nationalist ideology justified the dichotomy by saying that the material world is for male, as it demands practicality and deals with business. The spiritual world, which holds India's superior culture, requires conservation, and hence women represent it. This analogy reinstates women's roles as caregivers for the society. This dichotomy was a response to the claim by the British that Indian people are uncivilized and barbaric. This claim was made based on cruel customs like sati, the societal discrimination against widows, and the general illiteracy amongst Indian women. The nationalist movement, utilizing dichotomy, led to a clear construction of social identity and role of gender in the Indian society, which was represented by Bimla. Bimla is the Bhadra Mahila, who is a learned and sophisticated married woman belonging to the upper caste and upper class. She is as civilized as any British woman, but superior to them because her chastity is protected. Her chastity is protected as she does not socialize with any other men or step out of the Antar Mahal or the inner courtyard of the household. Ray depicts the complexity of the dichotomy between the home and the world through Bimla's responses to the changes taking place in her life Though educated and obedient, Bimla is not allowed to cross the passage connecting the Antar Mahal inner courtyard of the house to the outer or drawing room. Even in her even in her conversations with Nikhil, she is not willing to cross the boundaries, although he insists he insists. Eventually, she crosses the passage accompanied by her husband, but the move is criticized heavily by society. When she meets Sandeep, she is swept away by his passion, but in the end, she fails to break the shackles of tradition. In Ghare Bayre, another supporting yet important character is Bimla's sister-in-law, uh, Badarani. She is a widow and has no privileges, unlike Bimla. In several scenes from the film, she considers Bimla a lucky woman. She also disapproves of the freedom that Bimla receives from her husband, thereby subtly portraying how women internalize misogyny and the patriarchal norms set by the society. The women servants of the household belonging to certain lower castes are shown as not wearing upper garments. They are portrayed to have no conversation whatsoever with Nikhil or Bimla. The difference in caste and class is clearly reflected through Ray's portrayal of such scenes. Though the female characters in the film, Ray exposes the hypocrisy of the nationalistic movement. The portrayal of clothing and mannerisms by Ray brilliantly depicts how the nationalist movement redresses the independence of women from a certain class and caste. Widows and lower caste women remain completely ignored by the nationalist movement. Another interesting female character in the film is a British woman named Miss Gilby. She teaches Western music and mannerisms to Bimla. Ray has not given much screen space to this character, but she happens to be Bimla's connection to the outer world apart from her husband. Also, this character subtly represents the notion that was hammered in the minds of upper class Indians that British women were learned and more civilized than Indian women, which is why Bimla was being taught to become westernized women and therefore become more civilized. Ghare Bayre, a Bengali classic, remains to be one of the most controversial and widely debated topics among film buffs and feminists alike. It is a visual document that depicts the exaggerated emancipation of certain women and the forced implementation of the concept of Bhadra Mahila, thereby showing how women were only to be emancipated because they were an object of possession of men. Thereby showing how women were only to be emancipated because they were an object of possession of men, reflecting the social hierarchy and the position of men. The Home and the World is a 1916 novel by Rabindranath Tagore. The book illustrates the battle Tagore had with himself between the ideas of Western culture and revolution against the Western culture. These two ideas are portrayed in two of the main characters. Nikhilesh, who is rational and opposes violence, and Sandeep, who will let nothing stand in his way from reaching his goals. These two opposing ideals are very important in understanding the history of the Bengal region and contemporary problems. There is much controversy over whether or not Tagore was attempting to represent Gandhi with Sandeep. This is owing to Georgi Lukács' 1922 review of the novel in the Berlin periodical Die Rotfahne, that is typically translated into English as Tagore's Gandhi novel, where he makes this mistaken suggestion. The novel could not have been on Gandhi as it was published in 1916 and written before, when Gandhi had just moved to India from South Africa in 1915 and was not known a political figure. Gandhi gained political prominence in India in the context of the Khilafat movement of 1919, which was long after the novel's publication, and took over the leadership of the Indian National Congress in 1920. The novel was translated into English by the author's nephew, Surendranath Tagore, with input from the author in 1990. The novel is set in early 20th century India. The storyline coincides with the national independence movement taking place in the country at the time, which was sparked by the Indian National Congress. There were various national and regional campaigns with both militant and non-violent ideas, which all had the common goal of ending British colonial rule. Militant nationalism had a strong showing in the early part of the 20th century, especially during the World War I period. Some examples of this movement are the Indo-German Pact and the Ghare conspiracy, both of which failed. Particularly important to the novel is an understanding of the Swadeshi movement as a part of the Indian nationalist movement. The Swadeshi movement started in response to the 1905 partition of Bengal by Viceroy Lord Curzon, which temporarily separated Hindus and Muslims into different geographical areas. The Swadeshi movement was a successful resistance policy against British colonization. Indian citizens were encouraged to boycott British goods to foster Indian identity and independence. This movement was important in fostering the new spirit in India and separating India from Britain, which was largely thought to be responsible for the subsequent widespread poverty. Family structures in traditional India consist of not only the nuclear family but also grandparents, parents-in-law, and unmarried sisters-in-law as well. Though the joint family is linked to ancient India, it is still prevalent in modern day India. Traditionally, baby boys were preferable to baby girls, since boys were able to earn money and support the family, whereas girls were expensive to raise. In addition to being unable to work for a living, the girl's marriage dowry required a hefty amount of money and other luxury goods such as valuable jewelry and saris. Once girls were married off to the other families, they would have to address their new parents-in-law as father and mother. As homemaker of the family, The wife's duty was to supervise the household and take care of the children, as well as to please her new in-laws. The home and the world tells us not only the personal struggles of the three main characters, but also little details of the family structure and what traditional Indian households were were like. At the opening of the novel, Bimla is a traditional obedient housewife who is faithful to her husband, even forcing herself to be respectful towards her nagging sister-in-law. I would cautiously and silently get up and take the dust off my husband's feet without waking him. How at such moments I could feel the vermilion mark upon my forehead shining out like the morning star. However, as she falls in love with Sandeep, she slowly wins herself from her traditional housewife role. She becomes more daring, more confidently brushing off her sister-in-law's criticisms, crossing outside the women's quarter of the house, and easily conversing with a man, Sandeep, who is not her husband, through her change from the good housewife to an independent, more modern woman. Nikhil is seen and described as an educated and gentle man. He is from cooling aristocratic family of landlords, and his family prides themselves in beautiful women. However, Nikhil is different in that he married not only a poor woman but also one who was not particularly attractive. He is also popular in the town because he has not joined them stating, "I am not running amok crying Bande Mataram." In light of this, the police also suspect him of harboring some hidden protest. In reality, Nikhil considers himself to be more aware of his country's role in a broader sense and refuses to take part in Swadeshi. Bimla is the wife of Nikhil. She is described as not very pretty and from a much more humble background than Nikhil. She loves her husband dearly and enjoys being completely devoted to him. At the beginning of the novel, she seems to be confined to the traditional female role and has no thoughts of entering the real world. Even with persuasion from her husband, her feelings make a rapid change with the occurrence of the Swadeshi movement due to the Sandeep's radical influences. Sandeep is the third major character in the novel, completing the love triangle. He is a guest in the home of Nikhil and Bimla, and his revolutionary ideas and speeches had a significant impact on Bimla. He is very vocal in his anti-imperialistic views and is a skilled orator. Sandeep represents characteristics that are directly opposite to those Nikhil possesses. Thus, drawing Bimla to Sandeep, Bimla gets caught up in the ideas that Sandeep presents as well as the man himself. Her seemingly increasing patriotism causes her to spend more and more time with Sandeep, thereby solidifying the love triangle conflict. Sandeep's first name is translated to with Deepa, light, fire, flame. Bararani is Bimla's sister-in-law. Her relationship with Bimla is strained at the best. She causes a lot of tension in the household. She also uses Nikhil to get the material items that she desires. Bimla constantly complains about her to Nikhil. Bararani taunts Bimla for her mingling with Sandeep Babu. Near the beginning of the novel, Nikhil brings his wife Bimla to a political rally in an attempt to get her to join the outside world and get in touch better with reality. Though Bimla had heard of Sandeep before this time and developed a somewhat negative opinion of him, this was the first time she heard Sandeep speak. This event not only changes her opinion of Sandeep but affects her entire outlook on her life both at home and in the outside world. I was no longer the lady of the Raja's house but the sole representative of Bengal's womanhood, Bimla says. Towards the end of the book, Sandeep convinces Bimla to steal from her husband Nikhil. While in the act of stealing 6,000 rupees, she comes to a realization of the terrible crime she is committing. I could not think of my house as separate from my country. I had robbed my house. I had robbed my country. For this sin, my house and had ceased to be mine. My country also was estranged from me. This represents a character turning point for Bimla. While in the act of thieving, she realizes that Sandeep is not only corrupting and robbing the nation, but encouraging her and others to do the same. Ultimately, she ends up giving the money to Sandeep and receives unceasing praise from both Sandeep and Amulya for her newly recognized sin. However, Bimla realizes that she has made a mistake by stealing the money from Nikhil and attempts to have Amulya pawn off some of her jewelry to replace the money. Amulya attempts to give the box back, but Sandeep steals it and gives it back himself. This event allows both Amulya and Bimla to see that Sandeep is concerned only with himself, thus allowing them to break free from part of his web. It is during this time that Bimla realizes her power over Sandeep by being able to easily make him jealous. While the entire novel centers around the Swadeshi movement, the author of the novel is not advocating it, but rather warning the audience of the dangers of such a movement. Tagore knows what it is possible for even a seemingly peaceful movement to turn quickly into aggressive nationalism. Such a change would do the country more harm than good. The characters named Sandeep is the vivacious and ardent leader of Swadeshi. He knows that this movement has the potential to turn ugly. He fervently believes, however, that freedom must be achieved no matter the cost. Sandeep cites a story from the Bhagavad Gita in support of his own path. The story tells of the Hindu Lord Krishna advising Arjuna to perform his duty as a warrior regardless of the result. Sandeep's use of the Hindu epic poetry to support his movement illustrates the tendency of individuals to use religion as a basis for nationalism. The use of excerpts from the Indian epic poem was indicative of the blending traditional elements of Indian culture with the ideals and goals of modern Indian independence movement, as both have the potential to yield individuals claiming an unshakable fervor for their cause. This can be rather dangerous combination, a fact clearly acknowledged by the novel's author. Nationalism is also expressed through the rejection of foreign goods, which was a part of the Swadeshi movement. Sandeep was strongly against the sale of foreign goods, as Bimla stated that Sandeep laid it down that all foreign articles, together with the demon of foreign influence, must be driven out of our territory. Nikhil, on the other hand, left the opposite. He stated that the terms of banishing foreign goods from his Suskar market, that he could not do it, and he refused to tyrannize. Bimla even pleaded with her husband to order them to be cleared out. As the title suggests, a major theme is the relationship of the home with the outside world. Nikhil enjoys the modern Western goods and clothing and lavishes Bimla with them. However, Bimla in the Hindu tradition never goes outside the home complex. Her world is a clash of Western and traditional Indian life. She enjoys the modern things that Nikhil brings to her, but when Sandeep comes and speaks of nationalism with such fire, she sees these things as a threat to her way of life. In more than one way, the novel is a comparison of different views of truth. Which reality is truer is up to the reader's interpretation. Nikhil maintains an idealistic view of the world, while Sandeep takes a radical nature worshipping view. He feels Nikhil's view of the world is inferior to the real raw world in which he lives as a radical leader. From the first page of the novel, the love and union between Nikhil and Bimla is illustrated as something sacred. Nikhil proved throughout the story that he was undeniably devoted to his wife. He proved this first by marrying a woman who hailed from a poor family. Throughout the novel, as started earlier, a strong sense of devotion is seen in the relationship between Bimla and Nikhil. It is key to notice that an indirect evaluation of the role of women is seen in this novel also in a very subtle manner. In the society described, Bimla, like most women, blindly worships her husband. This can be seen when Bimla is described taking the dust off my husband's feet without waking him. When she is caught doing this act of reverence, her reaction is that had nothing to do with marriage. It was a woman's heart which must worship in order to love. This scene shows the average woman in the society who believes love will happen and worship is a given in a marriage. She blindly respects her husband without understanding or having a grasp of his. So this way, dear students of semester 2, I have completed my lecture and my today's assignment is over. Thank you. Lots of thanks to all of you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.